All right, so my neighbor has this Jetson electric bike. He's got a flat tire in the back. I just bought this from Amazon. I think tax everything included was about 15 bucks. So this is what I'm gonna replace.
I think they told me that they bought this from Costco a couple of years ago for around 500 bucks, and now I see it for about 375 bucks. So this is what I bought, and it's important that you order 14 by 2.125 as the tube size. First, set the bike upside down on a soft pad to avoid scratching the bike, and then remove two outer bolts on the rear tire. Make a note of which side the kickstand came out of. In fact, it's best that you take a picture of each part that you are disassembling, particularly the washers, so that you can install them back correctly later. Remove this small nut and three metal brackets, and again, make accurate note of how they came apart. Remove two 5mm hex bolts on the brake. The second hex bolt was really tight, so I had to use the wrench as a leverage to remove it. Note that this bolt was on there so tight that it actually bent my hex Allen wrench. After both hex bolts are removed, pay a close attention to how the brake is inserted around the brake rotor, and then pull the brake down straight. Now, to disconnect the chain, you need to push the rear tire towards the front tire slightly, and once you have some slack in the chain,
I don't know
dislodge the
how to get
chain
that
from the
chain
back
out.
tire gear first, and then
Maybe
take
we
the
take
chain
the
off
chain
the
off right here.
front tire gear. You need to dislodge the chain off of both tire gears to be able to create
Yeah,
sufficient slack in the
maybe
chain
I can
to
get
be
the
able to
chain
remove
off
the
right
rear
here.
tire. Initially, I left the tire on the bike and then tried to pry out one side of the tire to remove the inner tube, but that didn't work too well. It was definitely easier to do this with the rear tire removed, but it still took some force to pry out the tire on one side. A screwdriver may have worked better, but I didn't want to risk scarring or cutting the tire, and this plastic trim removal tool was kind of bending on me, which made it tough to get the tire out. Looking back, I think if you wrap some masking tape around the end of the screwdriver, then you'll reduce the risk of cutting the tire and you'll be able to pop the tire out more quickly. Once the tire is popped out on one side, go to the opposite side to remove the inner tube. For this, I used a wrench to pull the air valve out first and then pulled out the rest of the inner tube. Ah, here I see the cut at the base of the air valve. This is where it was leaking air. Also, check to make sure that the inner tube size is 14 by 2.125. To install the new inner tube, I worked from the side that had the tire popped out. First, get the air valve into the rim, and then gradually stick the rest of the tube inside of the tire. It's important to get the tube inserted in nice and flat without getting it twisted. Once the entire tube is pushed inside of the tire, now get the tire popped back on to the rim. At this time, pay attention to the air valve on the tube and make sure it remains in its location without getting pulled to one side. Now, let's mount the tire back on the bike. First, I latched the chain onto the rear gear first, and then inserted the rear tire hub back onto the bike frame, and then latched the chain to the front tire. It's going to be very tight when trying to latch the chain to the front gear, so you'll just have to get few gears into the chain and then rotate the tire to get the rest of the chain fully onto the front gear. Next, mount the disc brake back onto the bike and tighten it with two 5mm hex bolts. Also, I did mention this earlier, but I had to remove this cable from two retainer clips to work on the rear tire more freely. So you can put the cables back into the retainer slots. Hey, I don't know what these brackets are called, but anyway, get them installed back in the same sequence that it came off of, including the washer, and tighten the nut at the end. Because the chain is tight, it was causing the rear tire to pull to the right. So make sure the rear tire is aligned straight before installing the washer and outer nuts. By this time, it was getting dark and mosquitoes were biting, and I had my wife hold the flashlight, so forgot to capture the final video on installing the outer nuts. But everything is installed now. Now it's time to put some air into the tire, but this air valve didn't come out fully, so I had to pull it out first. The recommended tire pressure indicated on the tire was 35 to 45 psi, so I put 45 psi. This is such a tiny tire that it literally only took few seconds to fill the tire. Haha. Finally, the bike was ready for a test ride, but I'm hearing something rubbing against the rear tire brake rotor when the tire was rolling. As it turned out, one of the hex bolt on the brake wasn't fully tightened. You know, that hex bolt that bent my hex wrench earlier because it was on there so tight. In any case, once that bolt was tightened, the bike rode smoothly without any noise. And the bike owner, Jimmy, gave the final test ride and he was quite happy. By the way, let me introduce you to my neighbor's son, Jimmy, who inspired me to start the YouTube channel 3 years ago. You see, Jimmy has severe autism disability and impaired eyesight, but he has a great mother who perceived Jimmy as God's gift and showered him with unconditional love and care, and never gave up on teaching many valuable life skills that we all need. With all the physical, emotional, and social challenges that Jimmy had to overcome, the lifelong mother's love and Jimmy's desire to live a normal life, all those that spent time around him are so impressed with his politeness, sense of responsibility, work ethics, and achievements. Jimmy even won the presidential award in elementary school. No, not the president of school. I mean the president of USA. And in high school, he was so popular that he was voted the homecoming king. Jimmy's mother was only hoping that Jimmy could complete a 2 year associate college degree, but he's completed that with flying colors, and now he's trying to complete the 4 year bachelor degree. What an inspiration. My family is so grateful to have Jimmy as our neighbor. If you have an autism person in your family that is struggling, please consider having them visit Jimmy's YouTube channel, and hopefully Jimmy's positive energy can reach out and inspire them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.